The writer on the walls is another one of those classic abominations from SCP-1730 written by DJKaktus, a very well-known and respected SCP author who holds some of the best and biggest SCPs to his name. Now, the overall look of the writer on the walls is iconic and unique. You notice it as soon as you see it, and despite its humanoid label, you're certainly not going to confuse it with another humanoid entity. There's been a lot of fan art made about the writer, and it even featured in Lord Bung's In the Pines animation. Today, we're going to learn absolutely everything there is to learn about this entity.
Right, so first things first, what does it look like? Descriptions for the writer are quite vague, but fortunately we are provided with a still image from the exploratory drone that encountered the writer. It's a large sort of humanoid creature. It almost touches the ceiling of the corridor it is in, giving us a rough idea of how tall it is. The large sort of dome umbrella looking headpiece connects to the neck, and then that connects to the top outermost layer of the robes as a single piece. Beneath that is a secondary robe that flows all the way down to the ground. Beneath the robes there is a flesh body. It doesn't seem to walk by the accounts given, but instead appears to glide. A single long arm has been observed coming out from within the robes. It uses this to write cognitohazardous symbols on the wall. During my research I came across this photo, which I believe was the main inspiration for the look of the writer on the walls. This is an artistic piece called The Sentinels found in Scotland, made by a sculptor called Philip Jackson. So we know what it looks like, but what does it do? This is a pyroclastic cognitohazardous entity. For the most part, it uses the sludge found around Site-13 to write hazardous messages on the walls. Quote, "Drone observes as entity extends a long arm from beneath its outer layer and touches the floor. Entity then begins to make slow movements towards the wall behind it. It is noted that the entity left behind a number of unique symbols." The writer has two main methods of attack, passive and aggressive. The passive method is via symbols written on the walls. The symbols left behind on the walls trigger an anomalous event in all those who view them. The cognitohazard develops and concludes over 4 phases. Phase 1, a victim views the words on the wall. Phase 2, a victim will begin to grow quiet and not make any noise at all. Phase 3, victims will begin to burn from the ears. At this point they are now pretty much an activated and ready to blow human bomb. In Phase 4, any sound in a victim's immediate vicinity will cause the victim to explode. Silently. Like, picture an explosion but with no sound at all. These aren't little explosions either. The first time we see the result of one of these explosions was during D12's first exploration attempt of Site-13. The explosion killed the entire task force. The second one was the exploratory mission staff who succumbed to the effect after the drone observed and relayed pictures of the symbols back to them. We don't know how many died, but given it shook the entire site, we can safely infer at least everyone who was infected did, if not from the noise of panic and alarms blaring, but being in the vicinity of another explosion.
In a further cruel twist, people who are affected by the cognitohazard do not die. They are fully conscious and aware of their surroundings. This is highlighted when D12 break down a door with one of the victims inside it. Prior to breaking down the door, they can hear sounds from behind it. Quote, "You hear that? It sounds like somebody shushing." And once they break down the door, quote, "Video records 3 frames of a naked human with what appears to be fire burning from its ears, staring fearfully at the door." Now, I'm pretty sure someone who is, for all intents and purposes, dead would not be standing up with a clear look of fear on their faces, let alone be making shushing sounds in an attempt not just to save their own lives, but the people on the other side of the door as well.
The aggressive method is much more dramatic and much more to the point. A single white eye will open on the creature and look in the direction of a victim it has detected in its vicinity. This eye is another cognitohazard, so try not to make eye contact with it. The writer will grow much larger and its robes will flare out to the side, exposing more cognitohazards under its robes. Finally, it gains speed and will quickly accelerate towards its victim.
Now, the writer's cognitohazards can be nullified before a person views them by simply destroying them. If the symbols are made illegible, then they lose their anomalous properties. Much like any intricate system, all the parts need to be there for it to work. Quote, "We found another one of those messages down here, cognitohazard expunged. Only a matter of time before it starts. We strapped some C4 to it and blew the wall, and I think it's pretty illegible at this point." Now, there is no cure for anyone who has fallen victim to this thing's cognitohazardous properties, so if you've seen it, you're screwed. However, there is evidence to suggest that the poor people trapped inside Site-13 were aware of both it and its properties. such as the words on the wall, quote, "Don't look at the walls and kill the quiet ones."
Okay, so we know what it looks like and we know what it does, so what is it?
Site-13 was the primary containment site for every anomalous object and entity the Foundation and the GOC could get their hands on in this reality. Humanoid entities were not even considered remotely human, and they were not given any form of rights or fair treatment. Even the Ethics Committee could not step in. Quote, "The Ethics Committee tried to step in and they were removed. They dragged the old chairman Jeremiah Sumerian out into the commons at Site-17 and shot him in the head for being a traitor."
The writer was a humanoid entity that was brought to Site-13 for processing. It was experimented on and all kinds of mental torture and conditioning was applied to it to break its will for another unknown purpose. Quote, "Cognito hazard expunged has shown some tenacity, but will soon break under the mental pressure applied to it by the orators. This is not uncommon. Many entities arriving for their initial inspection will resist exposure to treatment in some way, but it cannot be sustained for the duration of their time here. The writer was then butchered and grafted onto something else by removing its face, neck, and upper chest and arms and binding it to a new frame. They could then use its cognitohazardous properties for their own reasons."
Now, we don't know what these reasons are, but it's safe to assume the GOC were going to use this against other entities. I do have a few theories. One is they were going to use the writer's properties to kill other SCPs that came to Site-13. This seems a bit drawn out in my opinion, there are much easier ways to kill something. Another was to use the writer's properties to write on the inside of containment cells and maximum security parts of the facility to ensure absolute safety. So even if something did escape, it would die. And the final, which is admittedly very far-fetched, but I do like the visual imagery it generates. They were going to use the writer to create a sort of organic minefield. Imagine hundreds of silent humans encircling Site-13, ensuring nothing could get away from it and nothing could get close to it without being blown up. I know, very far-fetched, but sounds kind of cool.
Ultimately, the writer is killed by MTF Samsara and the giant leech encountered towards the end of SCP-1730. MTF Samsara come across it during the final evacuation and riddle the fucker with bullets and incendiary rounds, causing it to burst into flames and lose chunks out of its body at the same time. As a final shot is fired into its eye, the big old leech appears and swallows the thing up.
The writer is a fascinating creature. Despite its backstory being kind of vague, its abilities are pretty flushed out in the image. Oh, it's incredible, you just can't get over it. It's so foreboding and devoid of anything that would suggest this thing was once human, a being with face and arms. The Site-13 scientists really sharpened their scalpels for this creature. They just kept cutting and cutting bits of it off. Was it a good or a bad creature before they opened it up and stuck bits on? We'll probably never know. But what we do know is that they turned this creature into a very sophisticated tool of death and destruction. Comment below what you think about this creature and any theories that you might have. I'd love to hear what you have to say, so please let me know.
Thank you all so much for watching. Big up the patrons and members for their continued support. They are the backbone of this channel. Please consider joining them. Special thanks to Rick Trexon, Wings of a Meme, Big Mac, Nicholas, Number of the Yeast, Infinitune, Splendy the Tear God, Razman, Guardian of Energy, Luna Wilson, Tamashik, Sam Samuel. Big thanks to the council members, Arctoast, Kibara, Captain Core, Hunter Killer, Tree, Cat Clone, Dr. Sleep, Bane, Monarch, Kikarin, Gammatorn, your local agent, Dr. Ironside, Eden's Gate, and Kirak. And huge thanks to the administrators, Andre Bachert, Viger, Kamana, Panzer, Techno Ninja, GFHD, Man Mana, and Deep Dark Pain. Thank you all for watching, I will see you all soon, and take care.